dirt shallow. How about that? Look at that, barely had her. Burner crawl, half-ounce jig. She's like 5, she should be like 6 or 7. Hey guys, this is Matt Weeda from Matt W Fishing. Probably see me on YouTube every now and then, but I'm here to talk about skipping a jig under docks. You know, it's something that when I grew up watching TV, watching the Bassmasters, I always see guys skipping the jig 20 feet under the dock, and I always thought that was the coolest thing. And when I first started fishing my John boat and stuff, that's like the first thing I learned how to do was to skip a bait. And 10 years later, I've gotten really good at it. And actually, when I go to lakes now, that's one of the first things that I look for or target, because one, not a lot of people fish docks. You got a lot of guys out there live scoping, forward facing sonar. Everyone's off the bank nowadays, so it leaves the bank to be fished with less pressure. So I like to target that with a half-ounce jig most of the time, 3/8 depending on the depth of the water. But man, a green pumpkin half-ounce jig has won me so much money skipping docks, just because the profile of the jig, it gets way up under the docks, it gets down to the fish, and it gets bit. And when it gets bit, it's usually a bigger bite. I mean, if you look at history, a half-ounce jig has probably won more money than any other bait on earth. It just so happens that it's one of the easiest baits to put up under a dock and to fish. I put a burner crawl on the back. It's just a perfect profile. It's got a nice kick in action. The jig that I reach for 90% of the time is an Arky head style jig. Like I said, this is also one of the oldest designs, but it's stuck around because it's so proven. It's just the back of the head's nice and flat, so it skips and slides across the water. It's really low profile. It comes around the wood in the docks, and usually under the docks you have steel bars and old pieces of the dock, like old wood and stuff, and it just doesn't get hung up. Biggest thing you want is a weed guard that just barely clears the point of the hook. To me, that's the most weedless jig that you can get, or weed guard angle. You have the tendency to get it to roll and get hung up in the wood when it's real close. One, it's a lot easier to compress and get that hook in the fish, but it's really close to the hook, and it just comes through a lot better. The burner crawl is the perfect size bait. I do bite about ½ inch off the top just to get it to fit perfect. I want the legs just past the skirt material. I don't want the skirt inhibiting the action of the legs. And usually I'll reach for this green pumpkin, pale brown style color. It just works everywhere I've ever been. It's the first color I reach for, and it's usually the color that I end with. One little mod I actually recommend that you do with the jig. Not a lot of people do this, I feel like, because everyone I see that fishes Okeechobee and fishes around the lake, no one touches their weed guard. But when you're fishing, I mean, these weed guards come really thick because they want it to give the appearance that it's a really weedless jig, and they are. But if you fish with a full weed guard, it's going to cost you some bites just because of the thickness. You got to put that much extra pressure to clear the weed guard to get the hook to go in the fish. So I actually get my scissors and I'll cut either from the top or from the back side with I'll get a pair of scissors and cut about 5 to 10 fibers out, and just make it so it's still, I mean, you're still going to come through that wood, you're still going to come through that grass. But once you put that real pressure on that hook set, you're gonna clear and you're gonna hook those fish perfectly. 90% of the time when I'm fishing this jig, I'm gonna fish it on a 7'3" mag medium heavy Senko Sticks rod. You know, I feel like this rod has a perfect amount of tip to where you could skip that bait and you can kind of lean into the fish a little bit to feel a bite if you're not really sure and them not feel you. But it's got the backbone where, I mean, Alex doesn't condone this, but I boat flip 5-pounders all the time with this rod. I mean, this is the perfect rod for this. I go with 20-pound fluorocarbon probably 90% of the time. If I'm fishing around really thick cover or really big fish, like around somewhere like, say, Santee Cooper, I'll bump it up to 25-pound fluorocarbon. But that's the beauty of a jig. The line pound tested, especially when you're fishing shallow and skipping docks, and usually less than 10 feet of water, the pound test line doesn't really affect the fall rate or the amount of bites that you get on the jig. So my approach to fishing docks with a jig, or any bait for that matter, is you don't want to roll up too hot on the dock. You know, when you're going dock to dock, your tendency is to want to try and get to the next dock as fast as you can, but you got to really mind your boat positioning. You don't want to turn the trolling around and blow 70-pound thrust of water up under the dock. So you usually want to ease up to the dock. Where I skip the jig, I'm going to try and put that jig as far up under the dock as I can, and every part of it, under the front of it, under the middle, under the walkway. One of my favorite parts of the dock that to me hold fish more year-round than any other part is where the walkway meets the base of the dock. It just seems like there's a lot going on there, and that's where fish tend to hold. When you get more towards the summertime or deep winter time, they tend to move out to the front of the dock. They want to be in that little bit deeper water, the deeper part of it. In the fall time of year, you'll find them almost at the first piling on the bank. I mean, and during the fall, they'll be kind of all over the dock. When I was on Lake Guntersville for the Toyota Series Championship, it seemed like I had to fish the entire dock very thoroughly, because you couldn't just blow through and say, oh, they're under the front, or they're under where the walkway meets. It wasn't that easy. You had to fish the whole deal. It's just fall time of year. Fish are doing all kinds of different things. So you kind of have to, you got to see where the fish are at on the dock, if that's possible, and just cover it thoroughly. But usually I try and skip this as far up under the dock as possible. You are risking losing more fish because you have more targets to pull the fish around, but you're definitely going to get bites that other people aren't going to get. When I finally get my bait skipped up under the dock, the first thing I like to do is just let it sit there for a couple seconds, and I'll play around with how I retrieve the bait. It'll either be just full, what I call full hops, where you just kind of give the rod a hop, or a double hop. Sometimes the fish aren't in that aggressive mood where they want the bait hopping everywhere. Sometimes you just literally got to just sit there and almost shake it like a shaky head, and just shake it once you get to the edge of the dock, and then reel it up and repeat. But a good hop, a double hop, a shake. Sometimes I'll skip it way up under there, and if I'm not getting a lot of bites, or if I'm trying to cover a lot of water, when the bait gets out of what I feel like is a strike zone, I will start shaking it and reeling it, and kind of like a swim jig, and swim it out. Guys, if you like fishing a 1/2 ounce jig, check me out on Matt W Fishing. That's my YouTube channel. You'll see a lot of this jig in action on there. So log on to YouTube, find my page, and check me out.